I have a question, and it's sort of like you've had a long career and you've done a lot of things,
Hmm.
and you've gotten to this place now where you could kind of, if you wanted to, pick and choose a lot more of the clients that you want, and you could even pivot into the hi-fi world a little bit.
Hmm.
But like,
Right.
there's, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are way, way in the first inning. And if you were getting started today, knowing what you know now, like, if you wanted to choose the path of mastering and being
Yeah.
as good a mastering engineer as you can be, working on the best
Right.
quality, best sounding records being made, what would you do to get going in that path, knowing it's a long journey?
One of the mistakes that I made when I kind of pivoted from recording to mastering is, um, well, there's a couple things, but um, one of them is that you don't want to mess somebody's project up early on, even though you don't probably know as much as you should know, or you got a good concept, you got a pretty good ears, but maybe your room monitoring is not, there's deficiencies. You don't know exactly where the deficiencies are, but you work with less than, perfect sounding room. Um, which is really the case for any mastering people. I mean, there's no perfect room, but um, I spent way too much time trying to improve my work as opposed to trying to get work. And it's kind of like, I don't know if it's like fear of failure. It's like, well, if I don't go and get work, I haven't failed yet. Um, but at one point, my wife at the time said, look, you're going to have to make this work because, or get a real job. And I'll give you a year to make this work. Because I had two kids at that point. And I went, okay, you're right. You're right. So then I pivoted from trying to find a deal on some great EQ and figuring out how to learn how to use the blah, 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 whatever. It's like, all right, I gotta, I gotta work. And so, and I mean, people were sending me stuff, but I wasn't working, full time. And I really spent time going after getting work. And, um, there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can go to local shows and meet the local bands. You can I preferred to do it online. Back in the old days of Facebook, I would find some, or I'd hear some band through the grapevine and be like, okay, well, who worked on this? Like, oh, okay, this engineer, and I just reach out to him shamelessly and go, um, I'm sure you have your people, but if something ever comes up and they can't do it, or you want to try something different, and by the way, until that day comes, if you just want to send me a track that's already been done, I'll send it back to you and kind of show you what my concept of it was. I got a ton of work like that, ton of work. And it didn't always happen immediately. Like I might email some person not knowing, and 6 months later he calls me like, oh, I never checked the email on my website, but I just checked it and got your thing. As a matter of fact, I got a 5-song thing I need done right now. And, we ended up working together for years and years. I did a zillion things for that guy. I never met him in person. And so, you know, with in the old days with tapes and studio stuff, you couldn't do that. But now you can just sling tracks all send me your track, and nobody thinks about like, well, it belongs to Universal. Nobody gives a fuck. Just send me the okay, you mixed the last Beck record. Cool. Send me one of those unmastered mixes. And because everybody's got it. Even if they send the assets back to Universal, you can bet they got that shit on a hard drive. So if you're a nice human being and you are straight with people, you know, they'll be like, yeah, okay, I'll send you a track. This so and so did this, but and mine comes back and be like, well, it's not as good as Ludwig, but it's pretty damn good, and you're half the prices. So and you start sending me the budget stuff, and then you just grind. It's not rocket science, You just I think you have to be not afraid to fail, and you have to not have it's like calling a girl for a date when you're in junior high school. It's like, I can't call Julie. She's going to turn me down. It's like, well, but you're not going to know until you call her. And so maybe you don't like email Nigel Godrich, but you find somebody of less godlike status that's doing good work. And you just, like, hey, I'm doing this thing. And if I'll do a free sample for you or whatever, you got something. And they may go like, yeah, that sounds cool. And it might take a year for that thing. And you periodically check in with them. Hey, how's it going? Is there anything I can do for you? And if you've got your game happening, like I was working at the studio, I knew what I was doing, but I wasn't really at the level that happened later. And it was a little studio in New York, and I rented their B. They had a mix room, and I rented their B room, and various producers would be in the A room, and I'd see who was around, and it'd be like, oh, Steve Lillywhite's in for a couple of weeks, And he came in and we hit it off. He's like, Ted Jensen's going to do the record, but why don't you do the B tracks? We got 2 or 3 B tracks, and and things like that. So, but that situation could happen even online. You don't have to meet the person, right then and there. And at that point, like, yeah, I can't, and he sent me some extra bonus tracks that, so and so did the whole record. Would be like Ted would be something. Then go to George Marino. They'd be like, I can't get it quite as good as these guys, because they'd also send me the other tracks. Can you send me the other tracks? And he's like, oh yeah, I'll send you those. You can play around with them, have a play. And so now I'm only technically going to add 2 songs to the end of the record that Ted did or something, or Marino, but now I can see what they're doing. I'm like, I can't make it sound good. What are those guys doing? It's not the gear. It's just something. Well, I used to think, oh, there's some secret thing they're using, and there is no secret thing, really.
Right. It's just that they put in the reps.
Oh, they've been doing it. They were, my age and older, only they didn't have a detour of 25 years recording. They've been, they just mastered for 40 years.
Yeah. And I think kind of going back to your thing about doing outreach and kind of being fearless with it, I think it's like you were saying, you can't call Julie because you don't want to get rejected. And it's like, you got to get comfortable with being rejected. And I think the same thing goes with whether it's mastering or mixing or whatever it is. Like, you need to, they always say you need to write, 1,000 bad songs before you get to like a really good one. Yeah. And I think like that the thing that I always try to remember too is like those other mastering engineers, they made way more bad masters than you did by that point. Right. But that's how they got to be able to do so many good ones and so much better ones, because they went through the pain of knowing what not to do.
They didn't maybe do bad masters because all those guys started in an era where everybody's mixes were badass, but they maybe were very conservative for a long time. Yep. Whereas, you go back and listen to some great record from 1974 and you'd be like, this would be amazing if it had like 2 more dB on the bottom. And you're like, well, a young so-and-so, Ted did that, and he's not going to crank the thing because it's coming from a top flight mixer and it's the Doobie Brothers, and like, who am I to do that? And so they had the advantage of kind of being conservative because the mixes were so good. And that's really where the era of little top, little bottom all day long, and a good chain. And then as the tools got more complex, there was a point in time where the mixes were still really great, but now the tools are more complicated and they can do a little bit more and they can just pimp it out just a little bit more. And then came the stuff where even major label stuff, maybe a lot of times the mixes are not all that great. And now they just have to help save it, But now the tools are so advanced, you can do a lot of stuff. And if you jump right into that scenario right now and you're 25, you're going to use you're not going to realize the kind of historical hierarchy, you're going to think, oh, well, every master's got to have like multiband and widening of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's only
Yep.
if your mix is crap and you're just trying to do something to, I do use those tools a lot, but only because I had so many years of mixing. So I'm so familiar with the minutia of those tools. And I've been doing it long enough so that I don't let them run me astray. Like I use multiband all the time, but I may only use 1 or 2 bands, and I might use some widening, but half dB or less than half dB, or my console is like quarter dB, half, 3/4 dB. It's very specific in the amounts that you can turn the sides up. So some things I do very little, it's just almost nothing, but a lot of things I will do a lot of little things, but I don't get lost in the weeds, and it still only takes me, even if it's really complicated, 25 minutes for a complicated one. And I know to stop and go, let me do something else, or let me walk outside, or let me come back. I've got a lot of shit going on this. This is a danger sign. And I come back in and listen to it. I go, okay, that's pretty good. But I don't need this one thing. So I've gotten pretty good at doing really complex moves, but I don't look for it to be complex at the beginning. I just like, well, it's leading me down this path of doing a bunch of stuff to get this desired result. But I don't automatically put that stuff on it, but I have no problem using 5 plugins plus analog on the way in.
So you're telling me that you don't need Pro Q3 with curves that look like a seismograph? I thought that's what the internet told me we need.
Yeah. I mean, that's a kind of a classic mistake is all that. But, you sometimes you need narrow, weird stuff. It's not, I do narrow, weird stuff, but it's only for like one little thing, or it's not, The other thing is broad curves. Because I never use broad curves that much in mixing, so like in the beginning, I just like, well, an octave is broad, like, and now I just use the broadest stuff imaginable, just, and I learned that from also seeing the big guys. I'm like, you go in like, Tom Coyne's room when he's still alive, and it's like everything on the Soundtech is on 5, which is the broadest. I mean, it's so broad, it's almost like you put 2K on 5, bandwidth 5, and you're boosting a little something, everything from like 200 to 8,000.
Wow.
It's
like a volume knob.
It's like a volume knob.
Yeah.
But it's not, because it doesn't make the whole thing louder. It just,
Yeah.
But sometimes not a narrow, but a not broad boost in the top can sound more pleasing. I don't know why, because you would think, oh yeah, broad boost in the top, whatever. Not always. Sometimes I use the middle Q, which is less than an octave, I think. But so I would say that the biggest takeaway for the mastering guys in your audience, you haven't spent enough time with the EQ. You got to spend a lot of time. You got to pretend that's the only box you have, and you're just going to use force of will to make that one box do everything. And if you keep at it, you'll find that you can do about 99% of the stuff with an EQ.
Yeah, that's great advice.
That's amazing. Yeah. So hustle for clients, do the best work you can, and learn that
retire
EQ.
and
keep it simple until you've had enough years of playing around with other tools that you can confidently be a little more complex without throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah.
And then eventually retire and go traveling around the world, talking to other audio nerds.
Yeah, totally. My girlfriend and I went to Scandinavia last year, and we only got to go to a few countries because she was there for an academic thing, and I was just kind of along for the ride. But we went to Finland, And I saw two of my best audio engineering buddies and spent time with them who I'd only known on the internet. And it was amazing. I went to the Yante Nif's factory. I used his console, and we spent an entire Sunday, had a great time. You know, of course, everybody over there speaks perfect English. And then a couple of days later, I went to see my another mastering friend, Jaco Vital, who he's got a Finnish last name I can't pronounce. Same kind of deal. He's got a great studio. He built everything. He's an electronics guy. They live out in the country. His wife's great. They got two little girls. We just hung out. It just cooked dinner for us, and these are like audio engineer guys, and they're my people. And we just, it was amazing. The whole trip was amazing, and being able to see, some audio engineers that I'd known online for a long time, but Yante and I had some FaceTime and stuff when I discussed the console, what I wanted to different about it. But and Jaco has been posting for a long time about he has a Scully lathe a lot like mine, but he actually repaired it all himself. The guy's like in electronics. He's one of these guys that almost all the stuff in his rack he built himself.
That's crazy.
And his work is good. I mean, I listened to a bunch of stuff. I was like, dude, you're badass.
That's crazy.
So, yeah,
it's a lot of hats to wear.
Yeah. He said, well, the lathe took a long time because we had the twins in the middle of it, so I had to take a few years off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Twins will derail your plans. For sure.
Yeah. Well, kids in general.
But I do hope to have the lathe back online toward the end of the year, and I have a specific plan for it. And I'll probably I'll need to bring it back here because I don't want to have to go out to LA. But it'll sit out in LA for a while, and I may go out there and cut initially before I break it down and bring it back. But we'll see. So right now it's right now the only stuff left is. So here's where it usually lives, but it's not there, and it's So it was Scully number 331. It was built in like 1939 or some crazy stuff. And I've had it so remade. It's like on the outside it looks like a Ford Model T, but on the inside is a twin turbo BMW engine with all-wheel drive.
Wow.
I mean,
go on. No, I'm sorry.
That other podcast I talked about it.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, if you want to get into the weeds with that, then check out the Attack and Release Show episode that you just did. It was amazing. Well, Dave, this is awesome. I don't want to keep you all day, and you gave us so much information.
There was some useful information. I just kind of rambled.
Absolutely, there was so much. There was gold in there. Gold in them waters. Or mountains or hills.
I usually ask
hills.
I usually ask the host questions because I'm just talking about myself. But do you? I know, Ben, you do both mastering and mixing.
No, I don't. I don't master.
Okay,
I don't master.
Carl, what's your
Carl does
focus?
I do some primarily mixing and additional production.
Okay.
So like I love coming in when the production is like 97% there, and it's just kind of like helping to cross the T's and dot the I's that maybe they were banging their head against the wall trying to figure out. But then like once I'm in the thick of the mix, I can have more context to figure out how to actually solve that problem. That's cool. It's kind of I get to flex all of the production problem solving, but without the responsibility of having to start a song from scratch. And I don't have to do any tracking.
Yeah.
Other than like tambourine. Which is nice.
Yeah. I love tracking, but I hate overdubs, but it's a necessary evil. So if I could like just occasionally track, occasionally mix and master, that'd be, but that's what's so great about the audiophile thing because it's usually live. And I have done plenty of live to 2-track sessions where, maybe we had a Pro Tools safety net, but at some point we didn't even have that. Like, let's just go to 2-track. And those are fun. The ultimate is to go live to the lathe. That's the only thing in all of audio I have not done.
That's like free falling and
Yeah, I've
You know,
recorded
no
everything from
parachute.
orchestras. I've recorded, African harps, orchestras, every genre, the mastering stuff, the lathe stuff now. The only thing I haven't done is I haven't gone directly to the lathe, which hopefully next year I can do some of that, because I have enough space here to do it. The studio's in an old house, so I could set everybody upstairs and run a snake down or something.
Yeah, it's got to find the right
So
band, right?
I
And film it.
there's local guys that can sing and play perfect. Like they don't have any nerve. They yeah, sure, we'll go over, and it'd be like they're not going to be like, oh, I'm a little out of tune there. Like the people I'm thinking of sing perfect every time. So
Sick.
yeah,
Wow,
so yeah,
that sounds
hopefully,
like an experience.
yeah. I'm hoping to do some of that. So that's like my retirement, is that kind of stuff.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah,
You're just scratching all the same itches, just in like a more personalized
yeah.
way and less
Well,
less
it's
biz
I
less
just always
less businessy.
I've always been a lifelong learner, and if I can't learn, I get kind of bored with it. And I'm still not totally bored with mastering. I mean, there's always new plugins and crap like that, but I'm kind of reaching the end of being excited about the mastering. I like doing it. I love when it sounds great, but I would love something that allows me to learn something new, and
Yeah.
the lathe definitely is that thing. And I by no means have it all figured out. It's, so yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that's like even like the thing that I find most common amongst audio engineers is this pursuit of lifelong learning. Like everybody in this industry, at least the people that tend to stick it out for a while, just keep wanting to learn and get better because
I think
it
you're
just
right.
it's the
I
motivator,
think
you know?
I think you're totally right. I think there's something about it that, well, there's such a learning curve initially. You have to kind of enjoy learning to even go through the pain of like
That's
figuring
that
out how to.
that is so
Like I
right.
remember when
That
Pro
is so
Tools
right.
happened, I'm like, when Pro Tools happened, I'm like, oh, fuck this, I'm out of it. Fuck this. And it wasn't because I hated. It wasn't because I hated the sound, even though I didn't think it sounded very good. It's like this is just so unmusical and unrock and roll. I don't want to look at a screen and do all this stuff. Like and now the editing and like, it was like the early days of MIDI where you forget what the song is about and they're just listening for the timing of the MIDI fire in the drum machine. It was like, is that off a little bit? You
Yeah.
guys may not remember those things, but early MIDI was like, it was not perfect. And you'd be like, the drums feel kind of weird. Well, it's going, but it's MIDI and it's quantized. I don't care. It feels weird. And that has
Wow.
nothing to do with the music that you're recording. And so early Pro Tools, like into the 90s, I knew some people that were very committed to it and had a big rig. But also the thing you may not realize is it crashed every fucking 15 minutes. And I'm like, up until the 2000s, like early 2000s, the top of the line Pro Tools rig would crash religiously every half an hour. And I'd be like, I don't have time for this. This is bullshit. So that's part of the thing that drove me to mastering was around the 2000s when it became hard disk recording. I'm like, I don't really want to do that. Well, then somebody asked me to mix a whole record and they were okay with me doing it at home and paying me a fair rate, like almost like a label budget rate. And I was like, okay. And I just went out and bought a whole Pro Tools rig. And I got some of it used. I got a friend of mine who liked to give me last year's converter because I'm like, I'm just using it for monitoring. And I had some stereo speakers. I didn't even really have mixing speakers and headphones. And I just had the minimum amount of plugins. And I can go back and listen to that, like first thing I mixed in the box. It was like Pro Tools 6.4 or something. I was like, it still sounds amazing because I had been doing it for so long that I'm being guided by what I want it to sound like. And it may not be the easiest way to get there. And maybe if I did the same thing now with better software, it'd sound like 5% better. But I could play you that CD. You're like, that sounds fine. And then the other thing that happened is I used to think, well, if I'm going to do this seriously, I really need to get some hardware. I need to look at SSL, just a few little things. And then I went, no, the mastering is where I'm really going. I'm not doing it full time yet, so I still have to take these mix gigs, but I'm not going to buy a bunch of hardware. That's not the thing. So I forced myself to work totally in the box as early as 2002, 2003,
Wow.
and I always thought, well, my stuff is probably not as good sounding as if I had good converters and I came out and I went to an SSL G series compressor, or maybe I had one bomb EQ on the vocal or an 1170. But it won't matter because it's close enough. But I thought, yeah, it's probably. And then I compared. I had a thing I don't know years ago, and I compared like one of those early in the box things with a record that I'd mixed on an SSL with all tape and mixed a half it. It sounded the same because I'm just making it sound the way I wanted it. It sounded just the same. Like I can't tell that this was, So I kind of lost. I had I have a solid awareness. The box stuff doesn't sound quite as good as it could or eventually will, but I can still get what I need to out of it now. So that helped me embrace the digital stuff with the mastering. And for a long time, my converters were not quite good enough, or I didn't have like a great EQ. I was like, well, I'm only going to come out if I need this cool compressor because there's nothing in the box yet that has the compress. And now that the compressors are so good, then I'm not leaving anything behind by going all digital. And I had enough experience with the mixing all digital and still do that I don't feel weird about it, So
Yeah.
I don't know what the point of that was, but
Well, different.
So maybe
It's
you
like,
will sell that Soundtech.
yeah. Well, the different tools are they get you there faster or they're more fun to use. But if you know what you want to listen to, then
yeah,
you let that be your guiding force, and then you'll get there either way. So
yeah.
work
And
with what
there's
you
some
can.
times where the digital is clearly better than the analog. There's a lot of times where, like, for whatever reason, it takes too much of a hit going to the gear. And there's a lot of times where the analog sounds surprisingly better than doing it digital. So I'll always go for the best approach. I'm not going to go against what is the best just for time's sake, but I'm not on a lot of material. It's not going to make a big enough difference, and I'm just going to work digital because it's just not worth the time. It's not going to be. It won't be any better, or it'll be 2% better. Nobody will hear it, whatever. And then a lot of times I think the analog's better, and I'll be like, all right, I better do this digital. And we're like, you know what? The digital's better. It's just better. It sounds better than this carefully crafted analog thing that I've done. So I'm not really dictatorial about one way or the other.
Yeah, but you're
and if
know what you're hearing.
I know what I'm hearing. And even if I do all analog, it's hybrid. I'm still using plugins and stuff to do other things.
I was going to say you're probably using software to like fix the there are like problems to fix.
Well, I have hardware de-essers and software de-essers, and I probably use the software de-essers more often, or I'll use them both. But I really need the software de-esser along with the hardware de-esser to get it to do. I want to make it sound like it's been on tape 2 generations, and the S's have been just carved off of it by 456 recording too long. Like listen to old Beatles records, man. There ain't no S's on those Beatle records at all. Zeppelin, no S's. And it's not because they carved them off. It's that there's 4 generations of tape, and they just get sanded off.
It's so crazy.
Yeah. So
just thinking, this is going to sound really gross, but I was just thinking, hey, mama, like the way you move going to make you wet. Just take the S out. I'm like, ugh, that's so much grosser. Thinking about Zeppelin without the S's.
Oh God!
Well, they're
so
there.
sorry.
They're not.
They're talking about the same thing. They are talking about the same thing, though.
No, they're
yeah.
Yeah, the S's are there, but they're not accentuated.
Yeah,
because digital doesn't have any tape compression, and analog, all the compression's in the high end. So it just makes it more palatable. The analog just makes it more palatable. If it's a really mission critical tape deck, like a pimped out 102 or something, it'll come back pretty similar. But your garden variety Studers, they're dark, and MCIs are not dark, but and the way you made stuff is the vocal goes down, and maybe the guy or the singer or the female singer sings it 4 times, then you comp it. So then it's 2 generations down, and then you mix it to tape, and it's 3 generations down, and every time it gets bounced, the top end gets smoother, and you add maybe a tiny bit more to compensate, so you get all the phase shit from continually adding more top end, and it just creates this stew. And so the other thing too is young guys that just have this kind of analog fetish, they're not probably doing it right. They don't have the tape deck scrupulously set up. They're taking a full digital mix and going there. It won't do the same thing after it's already been on digital. It's There's a whole thing. But I would encourage people, if you want to, the other important thing too, and I'll just leave this last thing, is another reason why I'm not saying that analog sounds better than digital, but I think it has a place to know what it sounds like, even in an all digital production. And you may say, I want these drums to hit super hard, so I'm not doing anything to those. But this vocal, I want it to sound like it's been down 3 generations of tape. And that is not a distortion plugin that does that. It's not going to, you have to micromanage the acceleration of the high end. You got to use a bunch of de-essers. You have to EQ it. It's got to be, it's not as simple as adding distortion. It's just not, because tape has a very complex transfer. The transfer curve is very complex. So if you want to know what killer analog stuff sounds like, the period immediately preceding digital audio workstations is the high point of analog. I would tell everybody to go listen to Fiona Apple's second record, When the Pawn. That is an all analog record, and it is flawless sounding. It's mega punchy, mega spacious. Her vocal sounds incredible. And it's all because it's ATR 10, ATR 124, ATR 102, Neve consoles. It's because it's the last of the tape Mohicans. And if you listen to a lot of stuff in the mid 90s, the stuff that's really well done, where you absolutely know it's all tape, put that impression into your squishware, and you'll have a built-in curve that you can go, okay, I don't want to sound like some old Zeppelin record or Stones. That was way pre.
Yeah, those early
I don't
days.
want to sound ultra hi-fi, but this whole like I want to sound like tape, and they've got a distortion plug-in and everything. Dude, that doesn't cut it. So you can make stuff sound really good in the box, but you have to have a very strong inner concept of what that sounds like. And just people of this generation just haven't had enough experience with tape to embody that. They don't have an internal. That's the only thing that the old guys have, is we just lived with the tape. So we're never going to copy that exactly, but it's kind of an ideal to shoot for. If you listen to that When the Pawn, it's the second or third Fiona Apple record. That it's unbelievable sounding. There's a bunch of other records too I could reference, but I'd start there. And the tip off is a vocal that's got tons of presence, but no sharp S's or T's. It's like so present, but there's not a shred of extra top end on anything.
That's so
Nigel
cool.
Godrich does that probably better than anybody else, because he does this artsy, cool, weird. I don't want it to sound real, but I want it to be very palatable. And he's from the last of the tape generation. He's just old enough to have started with tape. So I think the Radiohead records are absolutely brilliant. I listened to Moon Shaped Pool last night, and same deal.
What a record.
Like whatever you think about the band or that guy's voice, it's never splatty on the top end. It never sounds digital. Even a lot of those records are all totally in the box, because he has this analog thing in mind. And he's not trying to make it analog, but it informs what he's going for. And so to that end, because I have that, the only thing probably I do in mastering that is kind of a weird fetish thing is I just de-ess the fuck out of everything. I don't want any sharp accelerated S. I don't want to take it off, but I want it to sound like it's, because 2 or 3 stages of compression on a digital vocal, all you're doing is amplifying the leading edge of the waveform. And unless you're compressing it, a microsecond or half a millisecond, the T and the S is always going through before the compressor. You can do that 2 or 3 times, and now the S's are 15 dB louder than they would normally be if somebody was singing that thing. And people have just gotten used to that. Oh, well, that's just how it sounds. That's not how stuff sounds. And I find it very annoying even if it's very clean and doesn't break up. I do not want to be assaulted by that S and T that's had absolutely nothing done to it.
Yeah.
So I want to slow those down, sand them, and make it sound like, it's a 251 going to an Ampex 124.
This is amazing
and
advice.
You can do it. Sometimes I'll use 3 different de-essers at the same time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, when I'm mixing vocals, like, it's pretty normal for me to use like 3 or 4 de-essers, all just doing like very little, but it's like, 'cause I do a lot of like pop and like pop adjacent stuff, so like it ends up being loud compressed vocals and a loud compressed end result. But it's like, if you're not counteracting all that compression with the de-esser, by the time it gets to the end, like no de-esser is strong enough to do it in a way that doesn't sound like garbage. Yeah.
But I will try, like I'll have, I even have these rare and amazing sounding de-essers out of a Neumann cutting rack. And so these are to protect the cutting head. And I use them on digital mastering because they have a very unique sound to them. And then I've got this thing, which a lot of people have. And then I've got at least 3 or 4 software things that I use. But I wanted to just circle back really quick that here's a tip for you, Carl and Ben. If you've got an SE vocal, or maybe it was dark and you need to really brighten it up, or whatever the case may be, that the S's and T's are beyond what you want them to be. Traditional de-essers obviously are great. I think just the Waves de-esser is great. Weiss de-esser is great. But try this out. There's probably a couple of different implementations of this. I use the UAD version in my old ancient Pro Tools rig. I'm up to Pro Tools 9 now in my rig. So yeah. So I use the Fatso. I use they make a
Empirical Labs or something.
Empirical Labs Fatso, and I don't use any of the compression. I just use. It says warm, and I adjust the input and the warm is a click until the S's and T's get like 5 or 6 dB, and it does it in a very different way than any de-esser. It will attack a really bad 2.5K just as much as 10K. Try the warm setting on a Fatso. No compression, just that warm setting. And you'll have to.
And this is on their plugin, right? Not on the box.
Yeah, on their plugin. But because the way you instantiate it is just a number of clicks, there's no continuous thing. You'll have to sort of use the input level along with the clicks. You may have to turn up or turn down the thing. Like the 3rd click may not be enough, and the 4th click will be too much. So you just turn the input level down a little bit, compensate for some more output level. That thing, let me tell you, that I think George Messmer told me that like he'll put that on an acoustic guitar or a banjo and nuke it, and then parallel it with an unnuked banjo and acoustic guitar. But killer on vocals. Have I used it on drum overheads? Maybe not, but probably be good on really splashy, trashy overheads too. Try the Fatso warm and tell me, get back to me and let me know.
All right.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, Dave, I feel like we've taken enough of your time and you've given us so much amazing information.
We really really
Like-
appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Like just like the advice in the last, like, I don't even know, last 25 minutes was just like all gold.
I'm just trying to
So-
cram my little tips and
No,
stuff
it's
in there.
it's so good. It's like, I love how it's like so different than the last episode we did together. So different than the episodes that even you did with
Yeah.
the Attack and Release show. So like, there's just so
Trying
much
to
to learn from
repeat
you, because there's a
too
lot
much
of
stuff.
I guess, as in your words, the ninth inning. There's just so much information that you've gathered.
I'm kind of in the I'm in like
I love
the
it.
first half, not the bottom. I'm in the
Top-
top of the ninth. Yeah, I'm not quite
Okay.
the bottom yet, but
Yeah,
top of the
yeah.
ninth.
Well, I think it's gonna be a very long ninth inning. So
yeah, I hope so. I mean, my kind of cynicism aside, I still love doing it, and I just want to do it a little bit more my way than just, that's all. And I don't want to be
Yeah.
unfair to people. So, but if you're out there and you think, if you got a 4-song digital thing, try and get it to me before the end of the year.
love it.
I love it.
Well,
Love it.
I do Broadway soundtracks. I've done a bunch of those, and those don't go to vinyl. I'll probably continue doing those because they're really fun. I did a couple of big ones last year, but those are kind of fun because it's just change of pace, Broadway stuff. But yeah, I'll still keep doing it. So
All right,
But you'll half retire.
yeah.
that's the way to do it.
Well, Dave, thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Ben, thank you so much. You guys
Thank you.
are both so wonderful, and this was great. Thank you for spending your afternoon with me.
Ben, great to see you again, and
Yeah,
Carl, great to
likewise.
meet you for the first time.
You too.
I love what you guys are doing with the podcast, and I always watch the little blurbs. Your guests are universally amazing. I haven't had time much to go back, but I'm going to go back now and check out some Secret Sonics from the last couple of months, and check out some ones I missed, because believe it or not, I actually listen to audio podcasts because I'll pick something up. I'm trying to find something that I don't know, and somebody will say, "Hey, I do it like this." I'm like, I never thought about that. So,
Yeah,
It's that love of learning.
yeah, that's
Insatiable. Yeah.
that's how, probably might have been how I met Ben. It's definitely how I met the Attack and Release guys. I listened to their stuff and I sent them a thing, and I was like, "Man, I love you guys' podcast. It's cool." So
well, we're honored that you've listened, and we're honored that you've joined us. It's like,
yeah.
We're
Well,
just a
like I said, I hope there's
couple of folks trying to carve our paths.
Yeah, well, I hope there's something of value, and I didn't do too much repeating because, I kind of say the same stuff over and over on these. But anyway,
I don't think so. Well,
thanks, guys.
It's on the record, so people want to listen to the first episode. They can go ahead and see.
Yeah.
But also,
we talked about
tons of wisdom.
We talked about a lot of very different stuff, which I was happy to talk to. But yeah, I like having this one be a little bit more conceptual and kind of techy than the other one. So
Epic.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Great.
Well, y'all have a great rest of your day, and see you on the
You
flip
too.
side.
Go make some awesome
That's good.
records. And
I'll try. Thanks.
Yeah, I feel good.
Okay. Yeah,
All right.
I will. Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Dave. Thank you so much.
Bet.